Welcome back to CSC 343. This is Digital Forensics. The day and date is Tuesday, 27 January 2026. We're going to break from our usual format just to introduce what I would refer to as a teachable moment. Um, you see from the New York Times on the front page, there's continuing review of an event that occurred in Minneapolis. Would anyone care to describe what it is I'm looking at here? What is this about?
I could be wrong because I'm not fully caught up on the situation, but I believe there was a incident in the last couple of days where a man in Minneapolis was wrestled to the ground by ICE agents and was fatally shot several times, even after he had already been supposedly disarmed and restrained.
That that would what do the rest of you think? Would you agree that that's an accurate summary of what we're looking at here?
From what I've seen, I think that's an accurate description of what happened.
Yeah. Um, Hold on just a second. Good morning, Ariana. How are you?
Good morning. I good.
Yes, this is this is about the fatal shooting, and the New York Times has been out on point sharing different video recordings of the incident with frame by frame analysis, right? So you see here frame by frame assessment of actions by Alex Pretti. And how is this relevant to digital forensics? I guess my question to you as a class is, before the New York Times could show and share this digital evidence, what would be the responsible thing to do if a bystander with a smartphone said, "Hey, I've got a video clip"? What is something that in this scenario? So one of the things I hope you've started to understand, and it's a pattern thing that keeps coming up, is that one of the biggest components of effective digital forensics is an accurate account of the context, the scene or the given situation, right? So it's the context. And in order to be effective as a digital forensics professional, whether you're on the front lines as a digital forensic first responder, right? A digital evidence first responder, which is literally an acronym that's used to describe incident handlers, right? So incident handlers are, if they're competent, also well-versed in how to preserve digital evidence properly when it's encountered in situations. So they're on the front lines, they're digital evidence first responders, and they're part of the team. The digital evidence specialists, the ones that analyze it in a forensic lab, that's a whole different level and it's a different scope of activity, right? So that kind of gives us an opportunity to rope in some other primary concepts that are part of our review for Module 1. But let's get back to the New York Times. They have a staff, and this is on the front page of the New York Times. And the New York Times has been awarded and its authors, its reporters have been awarded Pulitzer Prizes and all sorts of accolades for responsible journalism. So here they are showing a video clip, a 5 minute, maybe it's 5 second, I don't know. I think it's 5 second. Um, I haven't played it yet, but they've showed and shared more than one video clip from more than one perspective. What would the responsible thing, what in your estimation, would the New York Times need to do if a hypothetical bystander approached the newspaper and said, I was there, I have a video clip, I have a video recording from my smartphone. I want to give this to you. What I'm opening this up for discussion with the class. What, in your estimation, given the context, would you think is the responsible and professional habit or practice that should occur before the New York Times puts this video clip on their front page?
In a cybersecurity aspect,
Yes, from a cybersecurity aspect and
well,
from a risk management aspect. The New York Times has a solid reputation. How do they maintain their reputation or preserve their reputation for responsible journalism given this context, right? So remember, context is a huge part of digital forensic competencies. You can't be a digital forensic professional if you do not accurately take into account the context of each situation because they all differ, right? So the question I'm posing once again, thank you for asking that, by the way, from a cybersecurity and from a digital forensics perspective, what would the team of experts at the New York Times need to do before this digital evidence becomes part of their front page?
Would say make sure it's not a fake video or fake news. Make sure it's not AI. It's a reach tool.
Make sure it's not AI, yes. A person claims this is a firsthand account and they were there and they were a witness. What other digital artifact can they examine
you
to
got,
to
you could
verify
look at
its
the
authenticity?
metadata.
Say again?
You could look at the metadata of the video file.
That's an excellent observation, Kings. What particular attribute of the metadata would be the most relevant? If somebody says, I was there and I took this on my phone.
The location and the location, how what type of quality video, and if it's been altered.
Right. So,
And the time as well.
yes, date time of creation is part of the metadata. The location in terms of GPS data, excellent. It would be a matter of due diligence, not only for competent news outlets, for credible news platforms, right? For those who practice professional journalism, right? If you want to maintain the gold standard of how to do this right, the team of experts at the New York Times would need to verify and validate the authenticity of the digital evidence presented to them, to include, yes, the metadata. Does the metadata track with the device that created it? So that, the claim is I was there, I had a smartphone. Every smartphone has a specific fingerprint, if you will. So the source, there are attributes of origination that must be validated. And here's an important concept that I wish to impart upon you over and over and over again. I want to see if you've been paying attention and you've been reading the study guide. and you've been picking up on some really, I mean, there are times where I stress the heck out of this one point. Is the New York Times, are they verifying the authenticity of this video with the actual evidence itself, or are they doing something else with that digital file before they assess for authenticity? Again, the context. A bystander approaches the New York Times, says, I was there, I captured this video. So now you have a video data file on the smartphone, right? Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
My question to you is, does the New York Times assess the authenticity of this digital evidence by examining and performing forensic tests on the actual data file itself?
No, they make a copy.
Cameron,
Yeah.
you're correct. What basic method would we use to ensure the copy is a 100% accurate digital representation? It's identical to the original file. What tool would we use to validate? How could the New York Times experts prove that, okay, I'm going to check for authenticity and they're going to make a copy? How do they ensure that the copy is 100% flawlessly identical to the original artifact?
We're using a hashing tool.
Yes, they would use a hashing tool. Does everyone understand what is meant by we're using a hashing tool on the original that's used to create an identical copy? And why would we not want, why would the New York Times want to avoid examining the actual copy and performing authentication tests on the actual copy itself? Why would they want to avoid using those authentication tests on the actual the original copy itself?
Because a case can be made that the New York Times might have ordered, changed the original.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. So, in a sense, in order to manage the risk of their business appropriately, experts at the New York Times, and these could be consultants, right? These could be digital forensic consultants under contract to provide consulting services for the New York Times. And I don't personally know how the New York Times handles this, but I do know that there could be court cases that, because this is in the public domain, there could be court cases based on the video that are now in the wild in public domain circulating all over the place. You have the potential for AI modification or alteration of video clips that are circulated, and they're called deepfake. Have you ever heard of deepfake before?
Yes.
Okay, so there is the potential for adversaries of the United States of America to seed social media networks, just flood social media networks with conflicting versions of the same digital or similar digital artifacts, right? And this is the world we live in, right? So that's that's a relevant thing, because what happens if there are consequences that result from the New York Times reporting of this incident? They'd have to defend themselves in a court, or they'd have to face review by a judge or a jury or both. If there were negative outcomes of their reporting, they would have to be able to protect themselves. So if that resulted in serious loss or injury because of false reporting or incompetent reporting or neglectful stewardship of the digital evidence, and so on and so forth, right? I'm not suggesting that the New York Times is practicing that. I'm saying that in order for them to maintain their exceptional reputation for responsible reporting and journalism, they would have to. Now, full disclosure, I subscribe to the New York Times, the digital version personally, and I do that in part because there are many news outlets that are showing and sharing specifics. And in my particular news feed, I have a challenge because I'm just sharing transparently. In my own case, I tie my digital phone to my work computer. Everybody sees this? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have tied my specific. This is a new Google Pixel 7. I'm kind of proud of this. It's probably the last biggest, baddest smartphone I'll own before I retire. And that would tell you how close I am to the retirement timeline. So in 2 to 4, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that time frame, my goal is to finish my work as a full-time member of faculty at the University of the Virgin Islands with the cohort of students that I'm with now and the students that I advise now, because I'd like to see them through to the graduation podium. So that's just a professional milestone I'm sharing here. Again, we're breaking from the typical format of our lesson. And I share that with you to tell you that I'm doing all sorts of research, cybersecurity related research, because I want to understand what's going on with the data between mobile devices and business computers, especially when they're tied together. There's all sorts of cute apps, and Windows has an app called Phone Link, right? And where I'm going with this is that where was I going with this? You have people who are providing digital evidence, and there are times where the device that creates that digital evidence needs to be available for further analysis and verification, right? So what does that mean? In order to validate that this, let's say I were there, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the observers here, okay? Oh, and by the way, do any of you, are all of you on your computers right now, or are some of you on smartphones?
I'm on computer.
I'm on my computer.
Okay. Do we have anyone that's joining the session with smartphones now? And would anyone,
I'm on my phone.
okay, I'm going to pause for 60 seconds and I'm going to ask if it's at all possible for you to lay hands on your computer and join the Zoom session with your computer, okay? And let's just give everybody a chance to get their screens up and join with their full computers and not their mobile devices, okay? But if you have your mobile devices and there are apps that tie your mobile devices to your computers, that's actually a good thing. So I want to, again, kind of circle back to the idea of context. Let's pause for 60 seconds or so, and I'll be right back. Please stand by. Okay, so thank you for some of you who have dropped on your mobile phones and joined with your computers. One reality of our work or this profession, and I'm gonna I'm gonna finish one last thought with you. I'd like to lead you through a discussion and or deliberation. Let's say that you're the New York Times and somebody gives you the video recording and they say, I did this with my smartphone. Here's the question. Would you need the device to validate certain aspects of origination? Would you need the smartphone itself to validate certain aspects or facts about the origination of the digital evidence? Would that be a prudent thing to do? A responsible thing to do?
Wait, what? Repeat that?
Let's pretend that I'm a bystander and I've witnessed this firsthand. And I have a Google Pixel 10 XL Pro. I've got a state-of-the-art, biggest, baddest possible that you could own, right? And let's say that I captured this video clip we're looking at right here, okay? And let's pretend that I approach the New York Times and I say, I was there in person. I have a firsthand video capture of what happened here, okay? Because they're going to do a frame by frame review, yeah? The question is, if the New York Times were responsible in its digital forensic methods, would it be prudent? Would it be important for them to have access to the actual digital device that created the video clip so that they could validate specific aspects of the origination of that evidence, the authenticity of that evidence? Would having possession of the actual phone, would that be relevant or important given what's at stake here?
I want to say no, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I think it would be inconvenient for the person, but I would say yes.
Okay. Other thoughts? Let
I agree with Lamar. I want to say yes, as much of an inconvenience it would be for the person, I feel like it'd be better to have the original device the video was taken on, just in case you need to compare or look at anything closer.
Okay. Any other thoughts? By the way, I agree with all those perspectives. I value all of those perspectives. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have to, but what's the alternative if you don't have access to the actual physical device where someone is claiming they produced a video data file? What's the downside for not having access to the device itself when you need to be able to validate specifics about the origin of that data file, right? I mean, can you prove? All right, let's change the question. Lacking the access to the actual device that created this digital evidence, could you prove that that video was actually produced at that location, on that date, at that time, using that phone? If you didn't have access to the device itself.
I don't know what tools are available, but I'm saying you can't prove that.
Well, that would be an accurate statement. Yes. Regardless of the tools that are available, if you can't lay hands, if you don't have physical access to the device itself, your options to prove, to assert, to affirm or confirm, to validate authentic origination are very limited, you know? So if you're ever challenged on that, right? So let's say a court case comes from this, or worse, a criminal case comes from this, felony criminal case, and the felony criminal case decides they're going to use this digital evidence. What could the defense say for the defendant? And in this case, I mean, who knows who the defendant is, right? Uh, is it bystanders that are being prosecuted for exacerbating and abetting and causing more problems? Is it the ICE law enforcement officers themselves who are on trial? And it's a criminal trial because the public opinion and the sway in this matter has so convinced everybody that this was a needless tragedy and this was an intentional, deliberate act. So you have criminal charges, right? I mean, look at the range of legal action that can play out from this one event, right? So let's say that this digital evidence is now Exhibit A or it's Exhibit B. It's one of the top exhibits in the courtroom, right? Would you want to present this digital evidence and could you affirm its authenticity that it was yes, it was this person with this device that produced this video? Or could the opposing counsel say, where's the device? How do we know this video was actually produced? This person claims to have been there. They claim to have created this video with their smartphone. Where's the smartphone? How do you know? How do you know it came from that smartphone? How do we know this digital evidence is reliable? I want to thank all of you for taking a moment to kind of examine uh, a recent event and in context, right? So if you've ever wondered why, when we respond to certain events, the actual devices, the computers, the tablets, the technology, the data, if you've ever wondered why that's collected and retained as a part of the chain of evidence, it's because sometimes the outcome of that review is so important, it amounts to somebody's personal freedom, right? For the rest of their lives. That a prison sentence, a life sentence for a mistake or a decision that was intentional. You know, our justice system operates on the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But we all know that that requires a fair venue. It requires objective review and analysis of the facts and the evidence. And what happens if you don't have the devices that produced the digital artifacts? At what level can you no longer validate the origination of that digital evidence, right? Well, how'd you get this video clip? They gave me a micro SD card. Does everybody know what a micro SD card is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so or they gave me a USB thumb drive. And how did they do that? Remember this screen? Can everybody see at the top here? Messages, phones, calls, and photos, right? Can everybody see this? So
Yep.
these are both
Yeah.
photos. These are both photos and screen captures on my phone, right? So if I hand somebody a USB drive, and I'm just doing this as a courtesy, right? Um, and I'm somebody off the street. At what point can you affirm or document chain of custody? Where does that begin, right? Um, if someone who claims to be a direct witness gives you a data card, but they don't give you the device, uh, how how is your ability, your capacity to validate certain things about that digital evidence limited? If you've ever wondered why it's a part of legal process sometimes to come into a place, take over the joint, confiscate everything, put it in boxes, and then log the evidence, and now you have chain of custody, and now it has to be preserved in an evidence locker. I think you said it would be inconvenient, right? Here's another question for you. Let's pretend someone walks into the New York Times, says, I was there, I captured this video firsthand with this phone, and they hold up the phone and they say, here's a thumb drive of the video, right? And the technical expert at the New York Times says, well, okay, this is amazing, and you have a video that's incredibly important. It's incredibly valuable in terms of discovering what happened and what went wrong and all this kind of stuff, right? In order for people to make the right decisions, informed decisions, proper decisions, we really need to ask for your device. And we're not sure how long it's going to take for us to get it back to you. We may never be able to get it back to you. Can we pay you for the phone? And let's pretend, let's pretend for a moment the person goes, heck no, I just got this latest, what's the latest iPhone? What's the latest, biggest, baddest iPhone on the planet? What's the top of the line now?
17 Pro Max.
It's a
I'll end the same, to be honest.
it's a 19 or a 17. What is it?
17 Pro Max.
17 Pro Max, right?
2 TB.
Yeah, 2 TB, 19 Pro Max. Are you kidding? I can't hand this over. Do you know what this costs, right? Now, the New York Times could offer to purchase the phone, right? Or they could talk to law enforcement and say, "Hey, the evidence you need for this homicide, right? It was a homicide. Whether or not it was lawful or whether or not it was unlawful and criminal, well, that remains to be determined." Can we all agree on that statement? Can we all agree on that statement that there was a homicide, somebody died? Homicide means there was a killing, right? Somebody was murdered. No, murder means that implies criminal. So homicide means human death, right? So there was a human death, whether or not it was criminal or whether it was accidental or whether it was unintentional, all of that remains to be determined. Can we all agree that the outcome of this remains to be determined yet, right? Is that something we can all agree on? And could we all
Yeah.
agree that it would be fair to compensate the owner of that smartphone so that they could have the smartphone, so that they could authenticate the origination of that digital evidence? Can we all agree to that?
Yeah.
And could we also agree that if you were law enforcement and somebody had that phone and they said, under no terms am I surrendering my phone, and you can't have it, but the digital evidence clearly shows that what it what it validates is a criminal act, a felony criminal act, and it's likely that someone's going to face a prison sentence. Would you understand or agree that sometimes it's necessary to commandeer or confiscate computers, mobile devices, Internet of Things, right? Have you heard about the intelligent assistant that was listening in the background when a murder for a home invasion occurred and there was a legal battle over accessing the data and the audio from that intelligent assistant? I'm talking about like Amazon Alexa or Google Home or the Apple equivalent. What is the Apple equivalent to Google Home or Alexa? Siri, right? Don't they have, doesn't Apple have an intelligent assistant? It's a speaker or they just use iPads and you're talking to your iPads or your iPhones? I don't know.
I could be wrong, but I don't believe Apple actually has their own Alexa. We've had Siri, the voice assistant, but I don't believe we have like a physical component to accompany it at this point in time. I could be wrong.
But they do have like a speaker, isn't there like an Apple speaker and
The HomePod,
the what?
the HomePod.
The HomePod. Yeah. So there's a HomePod. So if you were talking on your Apple iPhone or you were talking on your iPad or your Mac computer, and it was also connected over Bluetooth to that or Wi-Fi to that speaker, then you would have both microphone and you'd have audio input and output, right? Can't can't Apple owners demonstrate the same whiz-bang cool stuff that Alexa can demonstrate? Where you talk to it and you say, "Hey Siri, blah 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 blah," and then there's a response over the HomePod. That Apple TV does that, doesn't it? Aren't there component? Am I mistaken? I'm not sure where we are with that. Okay, well, the point is that there's audio we've already discussed that there's audio that's constantly being monitored for key phrases so that the intelligent assistants can kick into gear. And that audio is temporarily stored on the device and or the cloud. So can we all agree that we understand, given the context, it may be necessary to obtain the device or computer that created the digital evidence? Is that something we can all agree to and accept when the situation calls for it? Right? If you're denying somebody if you're talking about a life sentence in prison and you're denying somebody their freedom and their liberties for the rest of their lives, or worse, a death sentence, right? Can we all agree that there are occasions where obtaining and preserving the actual devices themselves is important? Yes or no? I need all of you to audibly respond one at a time. Unmute your microphone, say yes or no, I don't agree, or whatever. And no judgment.
Big question.
Yeah, repeat the question, a full question.
Can we all agree that based on the context, there may be a case where obtaining and keeping, like obtaining permanently the device that created the digital evidence may be essential in order for the outcome of the case to be proper?
I
I
disagree.
agree. I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I I thought I heard a disagree, and that's okay. This is open discussion. We're not, again, we're breaking from our typical format. No judgment. Somebody said I disagree. Was that Kings? I was watching the screen.
No, that was me.
Nah, that was not me.
That was Lavarn. Lavarn, are
Yeah,
you
you said that we need to keep the original device of the video to properly execute the case. That's what you said,
yeah,
right?
yes. I said
I
that, would you
personally
agree that
disagree.
there are cases where that's necessary to obtain
Maybe.
and
Mhm.
maintain positive control over the device that created the digital evidence?
Maybe some cases, maybe they determine on the device. Like maybe if it's like an old camera, maybe an old recording camera. But I feel like if it's from a smartphone and you send the video and you confirm that this video is real and
I mean,
everything checks out. And I don't think like the real camera or phone that you use is really necessary.
you don't think it's necessary. So is there video editing stuff that's AI enhanced now in apps? I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, in the interest of playing devil's advocate, what if it's a security camera in a building and it costs $20,000? It's a very high-tech thing. And and it's fixed to the building and it belongs to a business owner. Would confiscating the security camera and the video recording system in the back end would that be an appropriate uh, confiscation of equipment?
Sorry, is this question for me or the class?
Let's pretend that you have a security camera. It's hardwired. It's not Wi-Fi. And it's on a private network in a business building on the corner of this street, and it catches a different view of the same thing. Is it appropriate to obtain the camera and the security system and the recording archive?
Well,
Uh,
you're gonna need a warrant for that because it's private. But once you get a warrant, yeah, you could take it.
well, yes, if there was a court case and a warrant was so there could be a case, but let's be honest. Could a security camera that's hard cabled to a private isolated network, it's an internal network that does not have a connection to the public internet. What what is the likelihood of that being hacked compared to a mobile phone that's connected to 5G and also Wi-Fi and also Bluetooth and also near field communication?
The pre
Does everybody understand the difference in exposure?
Yeah, you're saying like the public one, well, what's on his phone since it's connected to a network is most likely to get hacked. But whereas hardwire, the hardwire camera is just recording and going to whatever database that's in the private network. No other network should be connected to it, so that would be harder to hack.
Yes, and based on your technical expertise, would you be comfortable explaining to a jury or a judge if the camera network in that building is not connected, it's isolated from the internet. It's an internal private hard cabled network to the security cameras all the way through the storage device that captures the streaming video. And it's been properly maintained and it has the latest software and firmware and it's been maintained with a service contract. Um, would you think it's reasonable for the business owner to tell law enforcement, no, you can't come in here and take my stuff? My lawyer is going to file an injunction in the court and say, this is different than a smartphone. It's not exposed, right? Would you think, as with your technical knowledge, skills, and abilities right now, would you be comfortable explaining to a jury or a judge why it's okay to leave the security camera attached to the building, but it might be different if you're looking at a smartphone because of the exposure or because of the potential for alteration of the video record through. I mean, do we know that the smartphone doesn't have video editing apps that are AI enhanced that could have produced an altered video unless we have the smartphone, right? I'm just asking the question. And I do respect everyone's perspective on this because this is where some of what we do best as digital forensic professionals matters most. We have to operate in different contexts. And somebody said the magic word. Wasn't there like somebody said warrant or court order? A warrant? Who said that?
Yeah, me.
Okay, so if the prosecutors for that jurisdiction approached a judge and said, "Hey, here's why we need that equipment," and the judge agreed because the judge was technically savvy, it would require a court order. So there are limitations to unreasonable search and seizure. And now this gives us the opportunity to kind of pivot into a really important aspect of our digital forensics, right? So when we talk about our first module, and we're talking about the profession and investigations in particular, I just want to highlight some things based on our review, right? As a matter of professional conduct, in order for your work to have credibility, there is a systematic approach that's required, right? And I want to talk a little bit more about the kinds of investigations that can occur here, right? So obviously, we see that there's a potential for court action with what happened in Minnesota, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree that there's probably going to be some kind of court? There's going to be we're going to see someone is going to have a moment it's going to see its day in court so that means you have federal rules of, so you have federal rules of evidence where there are federal violations and it involves criminal charges. So that's one aspect. The way the evidence is collected and how it's maintained and preserved, the chain of evidence, there's a specific protocol that has to be followed. In particular, the U.S. Constitution protects everyone's right from unreasonable search and seizure. That's the seizure part. So what we've been talking about is the seizure part, right? Separate search warrants might not be necessary for digital evidence, depending, right? So if you have a business owner that willingly volunteers and says, you can use the security camera footage, I welcome your experts to come in here. If it's the FBI or if it's other law enforcement, sure, come on in. You can get copies of all my data. I just can't operate. I mean, it's a private system. Nobody can hack it. I can prove that if you take my $50,000 security my system, I'm going to have a problem controlling other aspects of my business operation, and it could put me out of business, right? Because I can't operate efficiently and effectively without being able to monitor things, yeah, because of what I do and how I do. So one of the most important aspects of this is how the evidence is handled, and it's quite possible. Let me ask a question, and let's just show this screen one last time. If you heard whistles blowing and you were supposed to go to work that morning and you were in Minneapolis and you had a smartphone and if you left your residence to get out on the street, to get in your car to drive to work, and this was playing out in front of you, right? Would you believe that that morning you would have had no idea that you're going to lose your smartphone, but that it would become necessary? It was a necessary evil because of what played out and because of how the evidence needs to be preserved. Now, do you get compensated? Do you get compensated for it? Are you paid a fair amount by the New York Times or by law enforcement if it's confiscated, that kind of thing, right? Those are all separate issues. But the thing that most people don't get about this process is that you can start something that's very innocent and it's just another day, and it can quickly turn into something that's a life-altering, it's a defining moment in the history of your life from that point forward because of what you witness and what happens, right? That's the world we live in today. And for that reason, right? So they're making this point about investigations. We talked about data recovery as opposed to digital forensics. I want to get to this part of it. So over time, they've come to understand that there are solid practices when it comes to digital evidence, and there are habits that can compromise your integrity or the authenticity of evidence if you're not careful to avoid those bad habits. It says examiners must be familiar with recent court rulings. There was a couple in California, this was a few years ago, that decided they were going to arm themselves with automatic weapons and serious firepower. They went to a government building in California and they slaughtered employees of that government agency at their Christmas party.
When this was,
This
I
happened
never heard of
this
that.
happened in California. The two individuals that murdered everyone, they did not, I don't think they survived, but their smartphones were part of the evidence that, well, I don't know. I guess maybe they did survive. I'm not sure, but the smartphones had encrypted information, and the FBI told Apple to give them the encryption key, and Apple said, "No, I'm not giving you the encryption. Because if I give you that encryption key, that gives you the ability to monitor all Apple iPhone owners. I'm not doing it." This went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
Oh,
Okay.
I did hear about this. I did hear about this.
Yep. Right. That decision is precedent, and that decision was important because for its level of decision, the decision was finally rendered by the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, now law enforcement understands, okay, they can or can't do something based on how that court case played out, whether or not there's a law about it or not, right? And ultimately, Apple had to coordinate or cooperate with law enforcement to ensure that there would be reasonable access, specific access, not just unilateral access to everybody's private information, right? So now, one of the things that I'd like you to understand is that you can have internal issues that a company or an agency need to investigate. So in terms of your digital forensic scope, it's a private investigation. It's not open to the public. It's an internal matter, and it may have to do with somebody's behavior at the job site. It may have to do with, well, violations of corporate policy, or business practices, right? And the leadership wants to know the facts before they render a decision, before they decide, do we demote someone? Do we transfer them? Do we fire them? Do we prosecute them for criminal activity? They need the facts. The reality is, just like the shooting in Minneapolis, you can start a forensic process and it may seem like it's just any other day, and it quickly turns into something that changes lives forever, right? Or changes an entire nation's uh, dispensation with regard to our digital privacy and digital property and digital evidence, right? So you have to be prepared. You're going to hear me repeat things over and over again. You have to be able to prove it. So this thing about, can you prove it? Can you prove it? Can you prove it? That's going to come up over and over in class. You're going to hear me say that as you learn other digital forensic concepts and methods. You're going to hear me challenge occasionally, can you prove it? Right? You have to be ready to prove things in this profession. That means you have to be intentional and meticulous all the time, even if it seems like an ordinary thing, right? And the other thing that comes up all the time is that expect the unexpected, right? So something that starts as an internal thing, let's say that somebody has a not safe for work issue, and it's suspected that an employee, a very important employee, is doing things on their computer they shouldn't be doing. They should be doing at home, right? Let's say that it's pretty obvious that somebody is viewing uh, material that would be considered offensive to others, easily considered offensive to others, and they're doing it at the work site. We call this not safe for work, right? And let's just use a common example, pornography, right? Somebody's on the job, they see a link, oh, it looks really sexy. They click on it, and before you know it, they're into stuff that is embarrassing, right? So the company needs your help to determine how bad and how far did this go, right? Expect the unexpected. In your initial investigation, what you discover is child pornography. How does that change? How does that change the dynamic? Is it a private matter at that point? Yes or no? Is it a private matter at that point?
In
No.
No.
the, wait, what? If you said they find what? Child porn in the
Child
work phone?
porn. It's discovered that there's child porn on the computer. Is it a private matter? Is it a private investigation at that point? Can you continue it as a private investigation?
Nah, you gotta call the police, dog.
Yeah, you got to call it in. What happens if you don't call it in?
You use a conspirator. You could be held liable.
Yeah, you can go to jail. Exactly. You would be considered someone who is helping and abetting child pornographers if you don't report it. And this is a reality of our profession, right? If you encounter any of this, you got to call it out. You got to call them in, and you have to preserve the evidence, right?
But if it's regular, let's say if it's regular porn, you still gotta call it in. No,
No,
right?
no, no, but let's say it's a public institution and there are policies and procedures against sex discrimination, sexual discrimination and sexual harassment. And you have somebody who's indiscriminate about the porn that they reference and they access in the workplace. And so coworkers, it's spilling over into the airspace of coworkers, and it's offensive, right? There could be violations of federal standards like Title IX sexual discrimination standards that would require reporting and additional measures. So there are cases where even pornography could trigger it would require public action, and then it would no longer be a private thing, right? So if you're investigating sexual harassment, sexual discrimination thing because somebody thinks it's cute to do really obnoxious stuff with pornography, right? And it's just a joke to them, but it's offensive to other people. It's the main point that I'm sharing with you is you have to be prepared to prove it, right? Because you're going to hear that over and over again in digital forensics. So we're talking about the big picture of what the challenges are in digital forensics. The other big challenge is expect the unexpected, right? A case can turn and quickly mushroom into something. I'm glad you asked that question, Kings, because okay, it's not the best thing to do at work, but is it really criminal? Well, it can be criminal depending on the situation. For everyone's edification and for Kings, would you believe me if I told you that there are some workplace court cases that were so profound and somebody was so obnoxious with their pornography that it did violate Title IX federal law and it did result in public action and it became a very public matter. Would you believe me if I told you that's actually happened more than once?
Yeah.
Yes. It was almost like an epidemic. It was happening quite frequently, right? So you have two levels of investigation, private and public. But now public, there are two flavors of public, one that involve criminal law and one that's involving court cases. With a few exceptions, most court record is publicly available. So as soon as you have a lawsuit because there's a dispute, it could be a private internal matter, and when someone gets fired, they say, I'm going to sue you. And now it's in court. Well, as soon as it crosses that threshold, now it's a public lawsuit, but it doesn't involve criminal. So there are two levels of public investigation. So generically, you have two types overall, private and public. When you get into the public side, there's two flavors of public. It's public because it's in the courts and it's a lawsuit, but it's not criminal. And then you have the other that's criminal. But there's still law that applies, right? Also, I want you to understand a private organization can become public when there's violation of public law. What happens if there's a court case that involves what happens if there's an investigation that's private, but it's a public organization? Is that still private by definition? Let me ask the question again. Let's pretend that there is an internal investigation and it's just an examination of the digital evidence at first, and it quickly evolves into an investigation. But it isn't a private organization, it is a public government agency. Is that by definition a private investigation because of where it's happening, context? Yes or no?
I believe it could start out private, but eventually, because we're dealing with public matters, it would have to change over to public.
That's a great way of describing it. Yes, it could be an internal matter, but is everyone aware of something called the Freedom of Information Act?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
so if you in 19, I think it was 76, Freedom of Information Act. It's called FOIA. Um, our public agencies, our government is a public agency. It belongs to the people. And in, I think it was 19, yeah, 60s. So this has been around a long time. 1967, US citizens have the right to request information of their government under the Freedom of Information Act, which means that they can request additional detail. Now, when it comes to matters of national security or sensitive national interest, some of the information that's disclosed can be redacted. It means it's blanked out in some places, right? But apart from the sensitive parts that involve national security or privacy, those specific pieces of information can be blanked out. It's called redacted, right? But that means that doesn't let the US government off the hook. The US government can't just say, well, that's a matter of national security, so we're not going to provide any information at all. That's a non-starter. They're required to show and share to the extent that it doesn't involve national security and private personal privacy. They must disclose related record. It mandates, requires, okay? And there are specific exemptions. So this is something to keep in mind as you consider. I do want to share with you that we're going to post an assignment, right? So let's pivot. We're getting close to the end. Any questions, comments, observations before we take up a very brief overview of your next assignment? Your next assignment involves a download of Kali. And you have to validate what you download by generating a hash. So you're going to use a hashing tool. I'm going to provide a separate recorded segment that walks through the download. I want to add that, and I'm going to update the size of the file that you should download in the shortest possible or most efficient possible manner. I do want to explain to you that there are two flavors of Kali that you can download, and we don't want you to use the virtual machines that are packaged. In Linux, you have certain combinations of versions that are more stable. And these are often packaged or bundled together as pre-configured virtual machines. The downside to using pre-configured virtual machines is that you cannot update, you cannot maintain. It's kind of like a snapshot. It is what it is. So that combination of versions of tools and services is what it is. And when you try to run updates to fix bugs and patch security issues, you can't really do that effectively. Put another way, they make a determination that that combination of versions for the utilities and tools is stable and reliable. And to a certain extent, they back that, but not to an extent where it goes to the Supreme Court. Let me repeat that. Not to the extent that it would survive legal scrutiny. If it does not survive legal scrutiny in a courtroom, I prefer to use the actual real image to install. So I want you to know that if you download the virtual machine, that's not the version you need. You need to download the version that matters. Now, can everybody see Apple Silicon ARM64?
Yeah.
Do we have any Mac owners with M processors?
Yeah.
Yes, me.
Okay. Did you know that when you download your flavor or distribution, those are called distros, of Kali Linux, for Mac owners who are running an M chip on their MacBook or Mac Mini, they're out. They're in a lot of forms now. But unless it's Intel. If you have a Mac that's older that uses Intel, you're using the x86, x64. Now, I will, in the assignment, update the hash value. I will update the size of the download for each case. So I'll include both the Macs, both the case for Intel computers and the case for M processor Macs. And there's a specific version of the download that will include more of the tools and stuff bundled in. And once again, it'll be a short, separate recorded segment. It'll probably be about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just going to walk through what to do for this case and what to do for that case. You are expected to complete the download and verification of the download by the start of class on Thursday. This Thursday, 9 a.m., 29 January, you need to submit that you've downloaded this thing and you validated it's correct, it's uncorrupted. I can prove, what did we say just a few minutes ago? I can prove I have an authentic, uncorrupted copy of the digital forensic tools we'll use, the open source digital forensics suite. And that sets the stage for what we cover on Thursday. Any questions about your next assignment? I'm gonna update it as soon as we clear the screen. What's out there now is from last season. So I'm gonna actually, now that I think about it, I'm gonna hide this for now. Nope, it was hidden. It was hidden. To clarify, it was hidden. It'll be posted for viewing as soon as the rest of the specifics are updated. All right. So it says this version, it'll be a link directly, but again, I'm going to add a second link for Mac users. Okay. And don't nobody, okay, so I'm using bad English here, but please don't nobody go out there and just reuse the stuff from last season. Don't nobody go out there and download the complete virtual machine. I hope I've explained the difference between this and the virtual machine and why for our purposes, we don't want to use that yet. Now you can standardize on pre-configured virtual machines as a practice for certain cases, but not in our situation. Okay. So I'm not downplaying the value of pre-configured virtual machines for specific scenarios outside of the digital forensic scope that we're examining right now. This is a valued resource. So I no offense to the fine folks at Kali.org. Any questions, comments, or observations before we clear? Thank you for joining us today. I hope you've had a chance to reflect on the relevance for this course, what you learn and how it applies, how it can change the world for good. All right, we'll see you Thursday. Until then, take care.